Pain in the ass. Are you finally starting to take your music production and songwriting seriously? Do you think that you have what it takes to make a living in the music industry? Well, this marketing podcast is there to help music producers and artists to begin building a foundation to grow their music company from the bedroom to the boardroom. And now, here's your host, Brennan Lunan. What's going on, guys? Brennan Lunan here on the episode 6 of the Music Marketing Podcast. I'm here today to talk about writer's block or producer's block as it relates to producers. Now, a lot of times, people will go through these motions of, not being able to figure out what they want to do, not being able to, write songs, melodies, beats. They just won't have any ideas, and that's frustrating, and I get it. And a lot of times, we all go through it. And a lot of people tend to take that and kind of run with it, and they make excuses, and they kind of talk about how difficult it is for them to regain their creativity and get back onto actually producing and making songs again. So kind of wanted to touch on that today and talk a little bit about that. Now, so many people that go through this, kind of let that get them out of the studio. And, the excuses are kind of the same thing. I don't have any ideas. I can't write anything. I don't have any, no inspiration, nothing to go off of. And I mean, I get it, and everybody goes through it. So it's not really anything that, you should be ashamed about. But how you treat writer's block matters in your career. Because if you're trying to go professional and you're kind of jumping out of the bedroom and you're not going to be that bedroom producer that just makes beats and just, posts links on SoundCloud and just spams everybody's inbox. If you're over that, and if you want to go professional and you actually want to start, meeting deadlines and completing tasks and finishing jobs as you were assigned to do them, by a certain time, because you got to remember that while you're at home sitting in your bedroom, without any deadlines, somebody's out there is trying to meet those deadlines and trying to actually complete the assignment on time, because jobs have to be done by a certain time. I mean, it's kind of obvious, right? I mean, if the movie or the show that you're going to be producing music for is going to come out on a certain date, the music supervisor for that music department has to make sure that music is done properly, that they have all the necessary files, it's formatted, it's this and that, and you don't have the time, necessarily as a music supervisor to just deal with these emotional artists and producers and, kind of make them feel warm and fuzzy inside about, not being able to complete their work. So you got to realize as a professional music producer that your job is not only to write music, but it's to write music on a schedule. So if somebody says you have to have something done, you have to have it done. Otherwise, you're throwing them for a loop, and they're not going to be able to complete their work. So you don't have the luxury of just sitting on your ass and not being able to produce music, because, the first time you do it, maybe they'll give you a pass. The second time, I guarantee they'll never work with you again. This isn't baseball. There's no 3 strikes. Sometimes you get out before you even strike out. Sometimes if the music supervisor is not feeling what you're doing and not feeling your work, he's basically going to kick you right out of the process. Now, that's just, on a personal level. Now, if you're not meeting deadlines, it's a whole different ballgame. And, that's trust. People want to be able to trust you when they do business with you. And if you can't be trusted, we'll guarantee that nobody's ever going to hire you. Nobody's going to pay you anything remotely close to what you want to make in your career. So make sure that you understand that writer's block is just something that, yes, we all go through it, but how we handle it is, wildly different. And me personally, when I do feel writer's block, because I was fortunate enough to be taught the ways to deal with it kind of early on, I no longer allow myself, and I say allow because I no longer allow myself to feel like, you should have the freedom to just write or not write. If I have to finish a project, I don't have the ability to make excuses, right? I have to do it. So I want to give you guys a couple of pointers on how to get out of your writer's block. And I mean, these are like really simple things. There's not a whole lot to it. If you feel writer's block coming on, take a couple of days off, right? There's, nothing wrong with taking some time off. Again, it's not really possible when you're on a deadline, but as far as, again, you're a bedroom producer right now, you don't have any deadlines, no projects, nothing to really like keep you to your words. So walk away for a minute. Don't force it, because writer's block is basically lack of creativity. And you can't force creativity. Creativity is something that has to come naturally. You have to be inspired. And if you don't feel any inspiration in the studio,
walk away and just take a day off. Maybe don't take a few days off, but take a day off. Go do something else. Go listen to some new music. I always tend to listen to new music to get inspiration anyway, so it's kind of part of my everyday process where, if I'm at work, I always got, music on my headphones and I'm always listening to music while I'm working. If I'm home, I'm either in my studio writing or, I'm sitting on YouTube and I'm checking out the latest, or I'm listening to music on iTunes and, seeing who's, music, I get recommended by iTunes. So, I really love the playlist, and I listen to a lot of themed playlists like Chill Hop. They'll have a bunch of great producers that produce Chill Hop, and I'll sit there and I'll just listen to it. And if I usually hear something within, the first few songs, and I get inspiration right away. So it's kind of like you block out that nervousness and that, that agitation and the anxiety of not being able to write, and you just kind of forget about it. It's just like stress. You got to get it off your shoulder. You got to make sure that you're not dealing with it consistently and constantly, because stress is probably one of the main reasons why you get writer's block. Something happens in your day, you feel, stressed by something, you get in your studio, you're still pissed off, you're not able to create, you get further pissed off, and that just becomes a cycle of, just you being pissed off. And it's a catch-22 because, you can't make music when you're mad, and when you're mad, you can't make music. So you have to figure out a way out of that cycle. So, listening to music is, a great alternative because it could spark something in you to get you to, create something new. And you might end up with something that you've never even thought that you'd be able to create because, for one, you feel that you've overcome your writer's block. For two, maybe you heard something different. Maybe you got some inspiration from somewhere else. So that's something that I do, quite frequently. Also, I'm lucky enough to live right near great trails. So when spring hits, summer hits or fall, I'll go out and I'll take a hike. And I'll go around the water, either to the beach or by the ponds, and we'll the trails. It just the smell of the woods and the sound of the birds, just the nature alone kind of puts me at ease. Just makes you feel a little bit more grounded, and you feel a little bit more in touch with nature and the natural world, which kind of itself is an inspiration. You know what I mean? It kind of makes you feel like, you're more opened up, just your chakras or whatever you want to call it, a little bit more open when you go and you connect with nature. And they say that nature is great for stress relief in the first place. So it's a good idea to once in a while go out and just leave the studio, lock it down, and go out and enjoy the world. Don't be stuck. Another way that I would say that you could defeat writer's block is check out some new equipment. Maybe go to Guitar Center, maybe jump on a website, check out, Sweetwater, check out Z-Sounds, check out some other gear websites where you could learn about equipment, which will spark creativity in you just from looking at these expensive keyboards that maybe some of you can't afford, and use that as motivation. I mean, if you want something in life, you got to get it. So, using these things is kind of like a vision board. You'd be able to actually look at something and say, I want to have this. And, by saying that, the universe will actually kind of position you on a path to get it if you truly believe it, and I'm a big believer in the law of attraction, where you actually attract things that you think about, and you attract everything, whether it's good or bad, it doesn't matter. If you give it a lot of thought, you will attract it. So try to think about things that are actually productive and help you instead of more stress. So, new equipment, VSDs, if you want to check out some new VSDs, there's a million VSDs available. I joined splice.com. It's great. You could go listen to different sounds, and you might hear a sample, you might hear even a snare and get inspiration. So it's really important to just not sit there and dwell on what's bothering you. You could also try recording new samples, right? So a lot of times it's fun to just point a microphone at something and bang on it, right? Record it, and then try to use it in your songs and your arrangements, your compositions. The other day I was actually on Instagram, and shout out to the homie Clint Music, who I had on this podcast not too long ago. The other day, I'm watching one of his videos, and what he did was he went and got the Ninja Blender, and he recorded the actual sound of the blender running, and then he mapped it on his keyboard and used the actual blender sound, in the high timbre, and he was able to write a melody out of the sound of the blender running. just by mapping it on all those piano keys. And it was sick. And the beat that he put around it was crazy, and he's a super talented dude to begin with. But this is this is the type of stuff I'm talking about, people. This is how you want to be when you feel that you have a writer's block coming. It's not an excuse for you to walk away and do nothing, right? It's not an excuse for you to just feel sorry for yourself. And just the same way as when people lose their hard drives, they want to quit music. That's bullshit. Don't do that. Make sure that if you're feeling writer's block or you feel stressed about something, do something that's going to motivate you and empower you instead of, walking away and, going to punch a pillow. It's not very conducive to what we're trying to do here in the music business. So, I recommend doing things that will make you feel better, like connecting with somebody that you've, that you have something in common with that shares your interests. So like you have a producer friend, right? And you have somebody that you deal with, and maybe you've collabed with them before, maybe you haven't, but reaching out to people that produce, and that people might be able to do something that you haven't thought of because of a different perspective. I mean, it's all about perspectives, right? Life is all about perspective. So a producer who's a friend of yours, or somebody maybe you just reach out to, maybe you use this as an excuse to reach out to somebody that you thought about working with and just haven't had the time or haven't had the desire, or for a million other reasons you haven't reached out to them. So now you have this ability to reach out to them, and you have, your calendar's kind of clear because of this writer's block, and you end up working with them. It's a good chance that this person is going to, spark something inside of you. And maybe that they write a dope ass bass line, or maybe they write a sick drum pattern, and, you get inspired off of that and you start writing again. And that sends you down a whole rabbit hole of, creation that you might be able to pull out of that type of, that experience with this person. So, never look past reaching out to somebody to work with them and get inspiration off somebody else. This is kind of one of those things where, I personally like to get inspired from other musicians. So going to a concert or going to a show is always fun for me, because you could go to a show, you could watch somebody's set, you could watch a band perform, you could watch a singer do his thing, a rapper, whatever you do, even DJs. You could go to a show and you could find some spark of creativity there. You might even, talk to the artist, and during their intermission, or you might catch them outside smoking or whatever, might get a chance to meet them. And then who knows what that could go with. If you're prepared and you know how to network, you might turn that into an opportunity that, wasn't present before. So just going to a show, you might kill two birds with one stone, get over your writer's block and find people to work with. Other artists go to shows. Good idea to have your business card present. Good idea to network and not be an asshole, but, try to network with people on a friendly basis. Remember, they're not there to get handed business cards, so you kind of have to finesse and finagle it. But, going to a show is always fun. It's always great, and it always makes me feel, very creative when I come home. And usually it's too late for me to write, but, when I get up in the morning or, the next day, I won't be in a writer's block. I don't think I've ever went to a concert, came back, and felt like I wasn't able to create. So, very important to get out and actually leave the studio and go experience different things. Or you could just meditate. I mean, if you're not writing anything and the studio's quiet, just meditate. Just sit back, take deep breaths, focus on your breathing. Don't think about anything. Clear your mind. Just let the stress melt off of you and just sit back and, just think about nothing. It's a good idea sometimes for about 10 minutes to sit back, through a session of guided meditation. It's incredibly calming, and, you learn to deal with your stress that way. And I'm getting into meditation myself because, I have a pretty busy life. I'm pretty stressed out all the time, and it affects your health. It affects, your family. You don't want to be constantly stressed. And, I could imagine how some of us feel when we get writer's block and then we can't get through it. And it's incredibly stressful, and I totally get it. And meditation, I feel that, offers a lot in a way of clearing out all that stress and just getting you kind of in that right headspace where you could basically, sit and think about, what you want to do and, see the project instead of just constantly staring at brick walls in your mind, and it's meditation kind of clears all the cobwebs up, and it makes you feel good, and it also opens you up creatively. If you've tried any of these things, another thing I would recommend is just try working on something else. Get your mind off of creativity, go cut the lawn, go do something else productive. Get a win. That's really what this is about. If you get a win, and I mean a win meaning that you complete something, you achieve something, that automatically puts you in a completely different mood. So if you're working on a project that's music related and you get a writer's block, you might want to go and, look at everything else that is tied to your music project, whether it be marketing, advertising, if you have to do graphics, if you have videos, if you have to edit anything, mix anything. It doesn't necessarily have to be a creative process that you take on. It could just be something else. You know what I mean? It could be something that you don't necessarily have to even relate to what you're working on, but just get your head out of that hole. If you're stuck, it doesn't matter, what the end game is. As long as you get yourself unstuck, I'm sure that all my listeners are smart enough to be able to figure out, once they get themselves unstuck, how to get back in rolling and how to get back into business of, creating music again. There's plenty of things to do. I personally am never bored. I kind of get, dumbfounded when I talk to people who say they're bored. I just don't understand how somebody can be bored in this day and age with just so much, information at their fingertips and, the desire to do something. So, work on your marketing, work on your social media, get some of those followers. Don't spam people. I say this every episode. It's annoying. Just don't do it. But work on your social media, work on your email list. Make sure that, your website is running. Make sure you don't have any, errors or edits that you have to make. Make sure that you're just, you're all set in every other part of the business. If you can't work on music, work on everything else and get other stuff done. Because like I said, that win, no matter how big or small, is going to allow you to actually come back to music with a feeling of, victory and just a good overall sense of accomplishment that you could actually parlay that into, something creative. Now, since I've been doing these podcasts and talking to different producers and artists, I've noticed that there was, kind of this pushback against using loops. Like loops are something to be ashamed of because you're not an original producer. And what I found when it relates to, writer's block was that a lot of times a loop alone will get me right out of that writer's block. I may not even use that loop down the line in the sequencing and the arranging, but the loop itself, because it's ready made and it's just drag and drop and you could just get it going quickly, that alone could get you thinking about whatever song you're working on. That alone could make you feel, inspired again. Getting a dope-ass drum loop or getting, something off splice.com, something that's already pre-made that you could just drag and drop into your DAW and start sequencing, that alone might solve that problem. And so for everybody that wants to sit there and be an elitist and talk about how loops aren't for real producers and they make you a fake producer, get over yourself and realize that there will be time where you might need something to get you out of a ditch, and a loop itself might be what you're looking for. So I never really, I never frown upon people using loops. Obviously, if all your beats are just loops on loops on loops, then okay, there's obviously, a gray area where loops are accepted, but you don't want to overdo it, of course, and that's not what I'm getting at. But, don't frown upon using loops, especially in times where you don't have any creative ideas. So personally, I am a Logic Pro user, and, Logic Pro is pretty simple, but sometimes, depending on what head state I'm in, I might get lost in it. I might not be able to, figure something out, and that'll spark a beat block or a producer's block or writer's block, whatever you want to call it. That'll spark, this brick wall that'll come up and I won't be able to get past. And so luckily for me, I have other DAWs I could use. I have, FL Studio 20 that I purchased. I have, Pro Tools. From time to time, just for that creative spark, I'll switch to a different DAW. And it's a pain in the ass, I won't lie to you, because, even though a lot of the shortcuts across the board stay similar from DAW to DAW, but most of the time they just, whatever I use is different across, different DAWs. So it's a pain in the ass, but it does create like this feeling of new inside of me. So when I write on a different DAW, I just feel like I'm in a different studio and I'm in a different place. You know, my tunnel vision kind of gets locked in on the screen and I don't see anything else around me. And so using a different DAW kind of switches the whole entire vibe and might even make me create a whole different, genre that I'm not used to working with. So depending on, what you're normally comfortable with, it's good once in a while to just break out of that box and jump into a different DAW and just, create some challenges for yourself and create, some, you know, some obstacles that you just basically have to overcome in a different DAW that you might not be very, comfortable with. And that alone, that struggle alone may create that creativity spark that you're looking for. Don't be afraid to kind of go back into your DAW and try different plugins, try different samples, try different instruments, play around, start getting weird with stuff. It doesn't matter if it's going to work or not. Just start to get inspired by trying different things. And, it's really fun when you're using plugins that, allow you to just run a sound through or run your entire mix through it. I know Effectrix have some really cool stuff that could bend and chop and loop and delay and all sorts of stuff at your fingertips. So you could run an entire song through it and, chop it and scratch it and just destroy it and still make it sound cool and make it fit, your project that you're working on. But, trying different plugins is great because what you're hearing now could completely sound different running through a plugin, and that might create, a different mood for you, might put you in a different head state. I've also found that studio lighting kind of does a lot for my creativity. I've been using the Philips Hue, which is, a LED light bulb that you have a whole app that you could, plug in and, and start to control from your phone so you could change lights in your studio. So that's a cool little way that you could actually get out of writer's block. It's just changing your environment, changing the way it looks and feels. Maybe shift your studio around, move some desks, some, couches, if whatever you got in it. Maybe some, different perspective. Maybe put it by a window where you could look out to see the streets. You got to do something, and you can't sit back and you can't make excuses. And I'm giving you guys a ton of ways to break through writer's block. So all my listeners that are listening, I don't want to hear any excuses. I never want to hear you, talk about how you have writer's block and you haven't worked on a beat in 2 weeks. If you can't and you don't have time because work, kids, family, whatever you got going on, I understand. But that doesn't necessarily mean that you have a writer's block. It means you just don't have time and you haven't made it to the studio yet, which again doesn't necessarily mean that you have writer's block. But when you do have writer's block, and you do have family and you do have other responsibilities, make sure that you're at least doing something to unblock yourself for when you are ready to go back into the studio. Don't sit there and wait for things to happen, and don't sit there and wait for other people to change your mood, your environment, and so on, when that's your responsibility. And as a producer, again, we're usually lone wolves. We don't have anybody else to push us. If you have a partner, that's great. If your wife supports you or your girlfriend or whoever, your boyfriend, whatever you are, and whoever supports you is great. Use that. But no excuses, people. Really, there's so much stuff out there. Watch tutorials. I love going on YouTube and watching, ADSR tutorials, native instruments tutorials, looking at, different perspectives, I guess I would say, different perspectives from different producers. Just watching, old school beat makers like Pete Rock or even Kanye from back in the day before he lost his damn mind. Watching videos of them making beats is like super inspirational to me. It makes me feel like I want to stop watching and get on the beats myself. And I don't want to have to, sit there and feel like, oh, well, somebody else is creating and I'm just watching them and boo-hoo. I'm using that as inspiration, you know what I mean? And it's all, it's all how you look at things, I guess. To me, seeing another producer make something really super dope, I get inspired. I feel really charged up, and I want to go in my studio, or if I'm sitting in my studio, I want to just shut the video down and just start, banging out. And you have to remain positive. Keep your thoughts positive. Don't get negative. Don't start making excuses. Don't start saying this is whack and I'm not going to be able to do this anymore and blah, 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 and get yourself all worked up. You're not a toddler, and I hope most of my audience isn't toddlers because I do swear and I don't want kids to listen and get bad words from me. But you can't throw tantrums, and that's what writer's block often leads to is tantrums. Grown men, grown women who write music or write songs throw tantrums when they can't, write songs or they can't make music. So, nobody's got time for that. That's not something that I put up with when I hear my friends who are producers. Listen, don't give me no excuses. I have a full-time job. I have 2 businesses, and I still have find time to make music. There's no excuse, people. There's really no excuse. You really have to do it. Worst comes to worst, what's going to happen is people will take notice. They'll see that you're bitching online, and that'll create an impression on them that may kind of backfire on you. And so while you're sitting there and complaining about how you're not able to make music because this is going on in your life or that's going on or somebody's pissing you off or somebody's upsetting your creativity, nobody cares. It's not anybody's problem. It's your problem, and you have to work it out. So the less time you spend bitching about it and the more time you spend actually getting yourself out of that ditch, the better off you will be. Because granted, people will sympathize with you, and they'll feel bad for you, and you'll get some girls or some boys, whichever sex you are. You get your friends, your loved ones say, oh, poor so-and-so, and they might wish you well, and it really doesn't matter because it's up to you. You have to think critically. You have to think progressively, and you have to, kind of not allow yourself to fall back into the pit and just continue the climb up. So I'm going to keep this episode kind of short. I'm kind of on a time crunch, but I didn't want to skip a week. I wanted to, talk to you guys, and I want to give you guys some pointers about how to defeat writer's block. I'm going to be back next week. I'm always available for consultations and for music marketing and advertising. I do run a lot of Facebook ads. I have discovered a bunch of new cool shit. If you guys have any questions about Facebook ads, always hit me up. Be more than happy to talk to you guys. I do offer formal consultations. They're about an hour and a half, and we discuss your business and everything to do with it. And then I give you guys a game plan to make sure that you guys stay on a path by following up with you in the weeks to come. So you could always find me on Ecue Productions, that ECUE Productions with an S on the end, on Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook. www.eqproductions.com is where you could find me online. This is Brendan Lunan. This is episode 6 of Music Marketing Podcast. I promise I will come up with a little bit more of an interesting name in the weeks to come. I just haven't had the time. So as of right now, we're just going to go by Music Marketing Podcast. Again, this is your host, Brendan Lunan. Thank you so much for listening. Stay tuned for next week's episode. We're going to have a very special guest, and I will announce it on my Instagram page. Again, that's ecueproductions.com. All right, guys, we'll see you next week.